Let's talk about the red dye 3 ban. So the FDA revokes authorization of the use of red dye 3 based on the Delaney clause of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that prohibits authorization of a food additive or color additive if it's been found to induce cancer in humans or animals. Very important, that animals part. I'm going to leave a link to this PDF in the description or the show notes. So that way, if you want to dig into it for yourself, this is based off of Appendix D, parts 1 through 3 of the petition to ban it. So just some key points. We'll go through a quick overview. The FDA examined the effects of FD&C red number 3 on rats in 2 major studies conducted in the early 1980s. The studies aimed to assess potential carcinogenic effects by varying the percentage of red dye number 3 in the diet. Why do they do that? They're trying to find if there's a dose-dependent response or a linear response. Like if you start off with just a little bit, does it cause a little bit of cancer? And as you increase, does it cause an increasing amount of cancer? So that's why they design it that way. But the dosage levels, so the study number 1, this was 1981. The rats were fed diets containing 0%, 0.1%, 0.5%, and 1% red 3. And the findings were female rats in the 0.5 and 1% groups showed increased thyroid gland weight compared to controls. And FDA found a statistically significant increase in thyroid follicular cell adenomas and carcinomas in male rats across the 0.1%, 0.5%, and 1% groups. So a linear increase. That's that dose-dependent response that I was talking about. Adenomas and carcinomas, those are tumors. Study number 2, this was done in 1982. Basically, to confirm that dose-dependent response, they wanted to revisit the topic and give a really high dose. Instead of 1%, they went all the way up to 4%. And the findings of that were that the male rats in the 4% group showed significant thyroid gland enlargement. Follicular cell adenomas, 20.6% of rats in the 4% group had these benign tumors compared to only 1.5% in controls. And then 7.4% of rats in the 4% group developed thyroid cancer compared to only 1.5% in controls. There was also an increased incidence of thyroid follicular cell hyperplasia, precancerous growth, and slightly higher occurrences of parafollicular C-cell tumors in the 4% treated group. These studies led to concerns about these cancerous findings, but people have been contesting these results for a really long time. And so I think this is important because this is the first decision we've had of this kind in about 30 years. So I think this is a testament to RFK Jr. He said he was going to go after this type of stuff, and boom, before he even gets situated, the FDA announced that it was going to be going after this, and they did indeed go after it, and they did indeed ban it. So I think this is a really good thing. And the reason why I think this is a really good thing is I am coaching currently a 13-year-old boy. And, you know, having a discussion with a 13-year-old boy about food and trying to convince them to do the things that I'm doing, that's a very difficult discussion. And it takes a lot of strategizing and being gentle with the situation, you know, because he's 13, right? And it's hard for me sometimes because he's really tall. He's almost as tall as I am. He's a big kid. And sometimes I forget that he's 13. But because he's that age, I mean, what were you eating when you were 13 years old? Probably a bunch of junk. I know I was, you know, there was nothing but junk in the house. And so having a conversation with him about this stuff is really important. And just talking to him about looking at ingredients of the foods that he's eating, which he already does do that. And even his mother has made some comments about how proud she is of him because he's really like, anytime he's about to eat something, he's looking at the back of it and looking at the sugar content and all that stuff, which is great. And so I think knowing about findings like this are important so that I can continue to educate him and people like him, because I'm sure he would prefer not to eat something that potentially causes cancer. And he was eating Jell-O, and they actually just found that. So I had a conversation with both him and his mom, and one of the things he was eating was red Jell-O, and that has red dye 3 in it. And so, you know, you just never know. And I think it's best anyways to look at the ingredients and look out for dyes, because this brings me to the Fruit Loop story. I'm sure you remember back in the day, RFK Jr. got into some trouble about the New York Times said something about Fruit Loops. I don't have the story on hand, but one of my followers on Instagram was saying, who's claiming that Fruit Loops are healthy anyway? Because the story was that Canada uses fruits and vegetables for their food coloring, as opposed to America using artificial chemicals, colors, and a different chemical for freshness. Gee, GMB or GHB, something like that. I can't remember it off the top of my head. But anyway, so he says, who's claiming that Fruit Loops are healthy anyway? And in his bio, he had, quote, supporter of rights for the systemically underserved people of the world. And I think that the people that are upset about this, they are forgetting those people, that exact population, the systemically underserved people of the world. Because time and time again, I see people saying, well, you shouldn't be eating food that has dyes in it anyway. Okay, well, one, you got to remember kids. Kids are going to eat anything. I mean, Liam loves Flaming Hot Cheetos. There's all kinds of different things that he eats that have artificial coloring in it. Maybe not red dye 3, but who knows? It could come out a couple of years from now that red 40 causes cancer, or yellow, or any of these different colors. And so, you're not thinking about kids. And also, you're not thinking about people that are on food stamps, people that don't have enough time to cook fresh meals. Maybe they were working 2 jobs. They're a single parent, single mother, single father. They have a couple kids, and their kids, they have to work 2 jobs. So their kids kind of have to fend for themselves a little bit. And so they keep a lot of processed, boxed food on hand. Those are the people that ultimately are going to benefit from this type of stuff. And don't get it twisted. This is just the beginning. RFK Jr., I don't think he's going to slow down after this. He has made a vow, and I think this is just a sign of things to come. And so if we can help out the underserved people of the world by improving the quality of their food, decreasing their risk of contracting certain diseases, cancer and stuff, why would we not do that? I don't understand this sentiment. But one of the people that I follow really disappointed me. Just going back to it seems like people have a problem with this. He made a post of a couple memes, and it says, MAHA, which is Make America Healthy Again. And that's the RFK Jr. version of MAGA. MAHA, when a rodent study says an artificial food dye causes cancer. And it shows someone smiling saying, see, I told you. And then underneath of that, it says MAHA, when a rodent study says saturated fat causes cancer. And it shows someone really angry and he's red. It says, stop cherry picking data. And in his post, he says, big win today for politicians who get to kick our actual problems down the road a little longer and distract us from conversations that address how deeply institutionalized our public health problems truly are. Thanks for nothing, morons. Now, perhaps he just has maybe he's just a contrarian in nature. I definitely think this is good. I think him and I got into a little bit of a back and forth in his comment section, and I do understand where he's coming from. He's ultimately at the end of it, because I was like, what is your intent with this post? Like, you don't think it's a good thing, so what do you want? What are you talking about? Because there's always got to be some underlying what is motivating you to make this post? And he said essentially that he wants all of the money that went towards studying this little chemical compound should go towards things like kids' lunches. And that I wholeheartedly agree with. Because again, I talk to Liam about food all the time, and I'm, asking him what he's eating for lunch and stuff at school. And it's always terrible stuff. It's pizza, it's fried chicken sandwich, French fries. The fruit that they have isn't fresh, it's soggy. They'll have old sugar cookies and stuff and chips and stuff. It's just terrible. And so I agree with him that, the attention should be placed to those types of issues as well. But I think we can do both. I mean, this didn't take much. The studies were already there, and we're always going to do studies on different chemical compounds anyways. I mean, these studies were done in the 1980s. So if the studies are already done, and as soon as RFK Jr. is about to step into the cabinet, this decision is made. To me, that seemed really easy. All it took was just a little bit of pressure. RFK Jr. was just like, hey, I'm coming after you. And they're like, oh, snap. And they banned the chemical. Now, the meme that he posted, it showed a picture of the United States, and it says U.S. obesity rate by state. And it's like all the different colors of the different states. And then it shows the same map, and it says obesity if we banned all artificial colors. And he's insinuating there that banning red dye 3 isn't going to change the obesity epidemic in the country. And I agree with that. But if we can save lives by maybe stopping people from getting cancer because they're eating processed foods, why would we not do that? I'm not really sure why there's like a separation there. Now, the other meme mentioned saturated fat, and that to me was really strange because, as I said in the intro, it's one thing to try and ban one simple chemical compound, right? You can really single that out. It's not going to affect many different industries. In fact, it might help other industries because other industries are going to step in and try to create a dye that's made out of fruit, right? So as one gets taken out, another one steps in to fill that void because The foods are still going to have coloring, just like the Fruit Loops from Canada still are colored. They're just colored with fruit. But saturated fat, let's talk about saturated fat. Saturated fat is found in so many different things. So, he's saying stop cherry picking the data when it comes to saturated fat in the rodent studies. Okay, let's say we go after saturated fat. How many different industries would that destroy? How many different foods would that take off of the menu? I mean, you're not just talking about meat. I mean, it would get rid of all meat, right? It would get rid of avocados. It would get rid of certain nuts and seeds that have saturated fat. I mean, different cheeses, like the whole dairy industry would be screwed. And so I think it's just not the correct comparison. I get the sentiment, but to talk about saturated fat in that way just doesn't make a lick of sense to me. That would be devastating if we decided to go after saturated fat in that way. So I think people just need to keep in mind, as I said earlier, that the people that are going to benefit from this are kids and the systemically underserved people of the world, people that are single parents, people that are working multiple jobs. They don't have time to cook fresh cooked meals for their kids. Their kids are fending for themselves. That population is ignored. Okay. So if you're really claiming to be for those people, then be for those people, take the win, even though it's not a huge win, it's still a win. And hopefully it's a sign for things to continue to move in that direction.